Okay, now comes the super scary part. Are you ready? I am going to make a lap quilt out of those two feathered stars. It requires me cutting one of those stars in fourths. And that's what is nerve-wracking about it. But I'm going to demonstrate how to do it so that we can remove the fear for you, hopefully. And the positive thing is that with just a few more seams, we can make those two stars into a 60 by 60 inch lap quilt, which is really pretty great for snuggling. I do want to just highlight here that you absolutely need borders on this because our bias edges when we cut this way are going to be so crazy. Incredibly important to stabilize those outer edges. So, shall we? Okay guys, I'm going to do it. I've done it before, but it's still nerve-wracking. I've kind of skewed my cutting mat so that I don't have to reposition it as much. I have a 24-inch long ruler. To make this easier and less intimidating, I am going to be aiming for the next reference point in each case. So I'm going to go from the very corner to cutting right through this corner square to the corner, the opposite corner of that square. I'll have to readjust because I'm not going to be able to do one single cut. Here goes nothing. But I'm going to stop and reposition my hands so that I can get a good grip. Okay. So this is cut in two. I'm going to be really careful because this is gonna produce a lot of bias edges. Okay, now I'm going to gently reposition. Okay, I'm gonna cut from here to here. And this time I'm gonna reposition for the last cut. I want to make sure you can see it in the shot. So I've got this corner to the very end. I'm walking my hands. Okay, I'm going to set this aside. So I'm aiming from the corner to this corner through the square, and then I'll reposition. Since I don't have a reference, I'm just going to use this straight line that I've already cut. Make sure that my ruler will see me through to the end. Whew, sigh of relief, that worked out. Okay, now I'm going to get out the star that I made a few days ago. This is going to be the center of my new quilt. So we want the star points to align. So I'm going to flip this right sides together and pin carefully. I'm going to start at the star points. Now I'm not going to stretch these. They're going to meet up. Ideally, to have these fit without losing any points, there would be an extra 1/4 inch here, but because of the special nature of this quilt, that's just not going to happen for us, so we're going to have some blunted points when we're done. Still, I think worth it. I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch seam. Okay. Now I'm going to attach the other corner in the opposite side of the block. Again, we've got the straight of grain side of that block. Okay, so now the last two corners. So these ends, since they've already had a 1/4 inch taken out of them, they will have a little bit of overlap on the end triangle piece. Now it's time for borders. I've chosen this gold for my inner border, and I only had scraps of it, so I calculated how much I had and then found out that I could cut them at 2 inches, so they'll finish at 1.5 on the quilt. But I did lay out the quilt and measure it, and mine came out to 50 and 7/8 inches. So I pieced together the gold. I folded it in half to find the center of it, and now I'm going to align the quilt top. I have the center mark of the border aligning with the point of the star. So I'm going to pin the center, then I'm going to pin the ends, then I'm going to pin the rest of the length. I like to have this border strip against my feed dogs when I sew it under the sewing machine because it's straight of grain and I don't want to distort my bias edges any more than I have to. And now the other half. Looks like it fits perfectly, so I shouldn't have any issues with easing in any fabrics. And when I sew this, I'm going to use a 1/4 of an inch seam. I'm going to press the seam to the side this time, and it'll be a lot easier to press out toward the border. For the second border, I'm going to add it to the opposite end that I attached the first. I'm marking the center just with a little crease there. Okay, I'm going to press that to the side toward the border. So if we just sewed the top and the bottom borders on, we're going to need to figure out the border length for the sides. I'm still going to cut them at 2 inches, but upon measuring, I'm going to need the side borders to be 54 1/4 inches long. So that measurement may change depending on the size of your borders that you add. Okay, now for the side borders, and I've got a border strip 2 inches wide by, it's 54 1/4 inches long. So I've scored the center. I'm going to align the quilt top with the center, pin both ends, pin between, and then sew that seam. So I have these navy strips and I'm cutting them at 3.5 inches. And this should give us right around a 60-inch square lap quilt when we're done. I've creased the center here so that I can use it as reference when I am sewing my quilt top together. And now that I don't have a center reference, I'm going to also crease my quilt top. Measuring the quilt top first and then cutting your border to those specific measurements is your best bet for getting a square quilt, especially that we had the bias edges before we added the gold border. If we just lopped off a long border piece and didn't pin and just sewed it as we went, the chances of it ending up square would not be very good. I'm also a long arm quilter, so I know what it's like to have to ease in a lot of extra borders when you're at the quilting stage. So I'm a big believer in measuring first, cutting the border to fit, and then pinning it well and easing it all the way in. Border strip is also cut to 54 inches.